Chapter 5. Earlier that same afternoon, after interviewing Michael Portman and Paul James, Gwendraeth James had returned to the place where the red Toyota had gone over the edge of the bank. The day was beginning to close in. Darkness seemed to be spreading down from the hills. It was colder. Harry Warden was now wearing a jacket he must have brought with him, and David Pritchard had gone off shift to be replaced by a younger constable whom he didn't know. Gwendraeth nodded as the younger man introduced himself as Malcolm Powell, and then they were both joined by Harry Warden as the tow truck arrived. Gwendraeth watched as the driver reversed as far as he could and then unhooked a cable and attached it to a point underneath the Toyota and got back into the truck. There was a grinding of gears and the red Toyota began to inch slowly up from the ditch. Just then, a blue-grey Nissan turned through the gateposts and along the track. Malcolm Powell waved it down. "You have to wait, sir, I'm afraid," Powell said as Gwendraeth James watched. "Purpose of visit?" "I've come to see my uncle. He lives in the nursing home." Gwendraeth James recognized the voice immediately. He hadn't heard it for more than 20 years, and he wasn't sure he was looking forward to hearing more of it. It was one of those strange moments of recognition where old antipathies flared almost immediately. "Martin James," he said, looking at the tall, slim figure behind the wheel. The face and the hair were different, naturally enough, but the eyes were the same. "Hello, Gwendraeth." "Never thought to see you in Wales again," Gwendraeth said. It slipped out more quickly than he had meant it to. He had always thought that once Martin James had gone away to university, that he would move immediately into more privileged spheres. "We were in school together," Gwendraeth explained to the constable. Martin James looked back at him with no discernible expression, but there's no doubt that he had caught Gwendraeth's tone. "I was in school," he said. "From what I remember, you weren't there that much." It wasn't the accuracy of the reply that disturbed Gwendraeth. It was true that he'd never been particularly academic, and that as a day boy he had been uncomfortable in St. Illtyds from the first day he'd set foot inside the place. It was Martin James's effortless assumption of superiority that got up his nose, even after all those years. "I was there long enough to play some rugby and get some GCSEs, Gwendraeth said. The tow truck finished pulling the red car up the slope. It was in bad shape, with several damaged panels along the driver's side. And it was with some satisfaction that Gwendraeth turned to Martin James, asked him if he recognized it, and told him that he ought to, because it belonged to his uncle. The news obviously disturbed him, Gwendraeth noticed. Martin James made an effort to remain in control, but was not entirely successful. For a moment, his former classmate's discomfort pleased Gwendraeth. It was a reversal of the situation he had nearly always found himself in all those years ago. Then he used to get up early every morning to catch 2 buses in order to arrive at St. Illtyds in time. The small council estate where he lived, really a strip of half a dozen or so houses on the edge of the village, was a good 7 or 8 miles from the school, and the trip was complicated and involved 2 different bus companies. By the time he arrived there at 10 to 9 every morning, Gwendraeth had already been on the road for over an hour, and to see boarders like Martin James waiting on the front steps in front of the assembly hall had always got right up his nose. Now, over 20 years later, their apparently effortless superiority was being questioned. but I spoke to him yesterday. Is he all right? Martin James said. Gwendraeth then told him that in fact it was Parker Merriam who'd been driving the car and that his uncle was unhurt. A few moments later, he watched as the grey Volvo continued downhill on its way to the rectory. Still, there was no denying the complications of the case, the apparent lack of motivation for the retired lecturer's death, and the unexpected re-emergence of a connection from his own past. There was a lot to think about. Almost an hour later, it was dark by the time Gwendraeth parked the car in front of his house. There was a darker mist rising from the river and a buzz of traffic on the bypass. House was cold too. He must have forgotten to check the automatic timer. He went into the kitchen, reset the thermostat, and poured himself a glass of whiskey from the bottle that was still on the draining board. By the time he'd drunk half of it, he was feeling better. Didn't even mind the cabinets still in their boxes, or the dark grey paintwork. He didn't even mind it when the phone rang and it was his ex-wife, Sheila, with something to tell him. Gwendraeth? No. Doctor Who here. Can I help you? Funny. You used to think I was. That was a long time ago, that was, before you even joined the CID. Well? Well, what? Must be a reason you call in. Do I have to have a reason? You left, Sheila. I'm still here. That's obvious. I didn't want to sound too matter-of-fact, that's all. Your aunt called. It's your Uncle Edward. He needs to see you. Somehow, I don't think he's very well. She called me, like she always does. Gwendraeth took a deep breath. He didn't want to go into all the complications now. Does she know we're separated? Not unless you told her. Why would I tell her? He's your uncle, Gwendraeth. I'm only trying to do my best. The call finished. He put the phone down and poured himself another glass of whiskey. Then he called the Indian takeaway in Bridge Street and asked them to deliver a chicken korma with a side of naan. Then he went into the front room and turned on the TV.